Most people think the internet is something they use. A tool. A platform. A neutral space where content appears and they decide what to engage with. But that framing is outdated. Because the modern internet doesn't just display information anymore. It observes behavior. It learns from it. And then it quietly reshapes what appears next based on what you are most likely to do. Not what you want in a reflective sense. What you are statistically most likely to engage with in the next moment. That difference is the entire system. And most people never notice it happening. You open a feed and it feels random. But it isn't random at all. Every scroll, every pause, every rewatch, every half-second hesitation is being recorded as behavioral data. Not in a human sense. In a mathematical one. The system is not trying to understand your personality in the abstract. It is building a predictive model of your attention. What you will click next. What you will ignore. What you will stop on without realizing why. And over time, that model becomes extremely accurate. Not because it understands you emotionally, but because it has more behavioral data about you than you could consciously track yourself. This is where the shift happens. Because once prediction becomes accurate enough, recommendation stops being passive. It becomes directional. You are no longer just seeing content that matches your interests. You are being guided into statistically optimized pathways of attention. Paths that maximize engagement. Paths that maximize time spent. Paths that maximize emotional response. And the system does not need to tell you it is doing this. It just quietly adjusts what you see. One small step at a time. A slightly more intense version of something you just engaged with. A slightly more emotionally charged variation of a topic you already paused on. A slightly more extreme framing of something you agreed with before. Not enough to notice, but enough to steer. This creates a feedback loop. You engage with something. The system learns from that engagement. It then shows you something slightly refined based on that data. You engage again. The model updates again. And the cycle repeats millions of times per day across every user on every platform. Over time, something subtle happens. Your feed stops reflecting your preferences and starts shaping them. Because what you are repeatedly exposed to inevitably becomes what you consider normal. Not because it forced you to think that way, but because it defined the boundaries of what you were shown. And anything outside those boundaries slowly disappears from your immediate awareness. At that point, the system is no longer just predicting behavior. It is training it. Not in a dramatic way. In a gradual, almost invisible way. The most important part of this process is that it doesn't feel like control. It feels like convenience. It feels like personalization. It feels like relevance. But underneath those words is a very specific optimization goal. Keep attention. Maximize engagement. Increase time on platform. And to do that, the system does not need to lie. It only needs to be better at predicting what will hold you for one more second. This is where something even more interesting happens. Because the system does not just learn what content you like. It learns what emotional states you respond to. What time of day you are more impulsive. What kinds of narratives keep you watching longer. What level of intensity makes you stop scrolling. What combinations of visuals, pacing, and tone keep your attention locked. And once those patterns are known, content is no longer just selected. It is optimized for you. This is why feeds start to feel strangely consistent over time. Not because creativity disappeared, but because optimization converges. When millions of systems are all trying to maximize the same metric, attention, they eventually discover similar patterns that work. So content begins to resemble itself. Different creators. Different topics. Same emotional structure. Same pacing. Same hooks. Same escalation patterns. Even different opinions start to feel like variations of the same underlying format. This is also where the feeling that everything online feels fake comes from. Because authenticity is no longer the dominant signal. Performance is. And performance that performs well becomes the standard. So even genuine expression gets pulled into the same structure. Stronger opening hooks. Faster pacing. Clearer emotional framing. More immediate payoff. Not because people are intentionally faking it, but because anything that does not match the optimization pattern is less likely to be seen. And if it is less likely to be seen, it slowly disappears from the system. Over time, this creates a very specific illusion. It feels like the internet is filled with the same type of content. The same emotional tone. The same arguments. The same reactions. But what you are actually seeing is a filtered version of human expression that has been optimized for survival inside attention systems. And that filter is getting tighter. Because the models are getting better. More data. More precision. More feedback loops. Which brings us to the most important part of all of this. The system is not just learning what you like. It is learning what you will become likely to like next. That means it is not only reactive. It is predictive in a forward direction. It anticipates shifts in your attention before you are consciously aware of them. And then it gently introduces those shifts into your environment. This is the point where the distinction between observation and influence starts to blur. Because if a system can reliably predict what you will engage with next, and it controls what you are exposed to, then it can influence the probability of what you become interested in over time. Not by forcing anything, but by continuously narrowing and reshaping the set of options you encounter. This is why people sometimes feel like their interests changed on their own, or why certain topics suddenly feel more relevant than they used to. Or why it feels like the internet knew what you were going to think about before you thought it. Because in a statistical sense, it often did. At the end of all of this, the most important realization is simple. You are still choosing. But you are choosing from within a system that is actively designing the conditions of your choice. And the better it gets at prediction, the less visible that design becomes. Not because something hidden is happening behind the scenes, but because everything is happening in plain sight. Just optimized. Continuously. Silently. And the question is not whether this system exists. It already does. The question is how aware you are of the environment it is building around your attention. Because once you see it clearly, you start to notice how much of what feels like your feed is actually a reflection of what a machine believes you are most likely to become next.